Hello everyone. A long time ago, a magician called Alexander had a student named Hector. He was a good student, and he came up with all kinds of new ways of magic and also of teaching magic. And after a while, Hector and Alexander decided that they couldn't decide which of their magical schools was superior. And to find out, they created the challenge. And in this challenge, each of them would pick one contestant, would teach their school of magic to them, and then pit these two contestants against each other to see which of the schools was superior. And the contestants wouldn't know about it. That is kind of the premise of this book, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And this is going to be a review with spoilers of said book. Now, to get this out of the way, this copy of the book is probably one of the ugliest books I have ever seen. I'm not quite sure if this is the first imprint and they were like, oh, we've got this really good book, we're going to publish it. Oh my God, we'll have to pay a concept artist. We don't want to invest any money, so they came up with this, because it's one ugly book. Or if they decided to market it this way because they didn't want anyone to buy it. Modern, and this book is only 13 years old, but modern editions of this book look a lot more like a night circus would. They look magical. So ignore the fact that this is probably one of the ugliest books you'll ever see. I thrifted this, which in and of itself isn't a problem. But at this stage, I'm like, I need to buy this again with a lovely cover. First of all, because I want to support Erin Morgenstern. Because, spoiler alert, this is going to be one of my desert island books. But also because I hate this copy. So, in the Night Circus, we have Alexander and Hector. They're kind of like the brackets, the bookends of the story. And the fact that they are trying to find out whose school of magic and teaching of magic is superior. We're not quite sure, and it's never explicitly stated when they started, but it becomes quite clear that they are, if not immortal, then at least very long-lived. The bulk of the story is set between, I want to say, 1870 and 1902. So it spans about 32 years. It jumps between times and it jumps between places because it is set in a traveling circus. So you will end up in places like London. They sometimes show up in Australia, Canada, the United States, mainland Europe. But it's not really that important because besides London, the venue isn't really described. The city or the place where the circus is set up isn't really important. You know, it's New York, it's Boston, but you never really visit the town, you never really learn about the cities at all. They're basically just mentioned in passing. So, in the 1870s, Hector, one day after a show, he's now going by the name Prospero the Enchanter, hello Shakespeare, is visited by a man who says, this is your daughter. And he's presented with about a 5-year-old child named Celia Bowen. It turns out that Prospero the Enchanter is just that. He's an enchanter and a manipulator. So he manipulated Celia's mother into falling in love with him. I'm not sure if he actually genuinely loved her and then his love died or withered or whatever, or if he was just looking for somebody to beget a child on. It's never quite made clear, although when I see what happens later, I would say he just wanted offspring so that he could have a contestant. So anyway, her mother starts pining for him once he's left her, and she finally takes her own life. And so Celia is sent to her father, who is then her guardian. He also notices that she can already do magic by herself, and he starts to teach her, and he informs Alexander that he wants to start another competition. So Alexander should choose a contestant himself. And Alexander does just that. So we see that Alexander goes to an orphanage somewhere in London and he auditions a couple of children and he chooses a boy and basically takes this boy, puts him into a room, gives him lots of books to read, and he teaches him magic through books, whereas Celia is learning it more through learning by doing. She's also starting out doing little magic tricks. She then works as a divination occultist kind of person who does fake seances to make money, because obviously talking to the dead, to the newly bereaved, on behalf of the newly bereaved is a good source of income. And she travels with her dad, who is still Prospero the Enchanter and works for a circus or as a show artist. And so she learns the trade. So she does all kinds of illusions. But unlike normal magicians, their magic, of course, is real. So when she takes a dove and turns it into a shawl, it really happens. It's not just something she does because she's very dexterous and can pull it off because her sleight of hand is so high. Marco, after a while, is then given an apartment of his own where he's set up on his own. Alexander completely leaves him. He never sets foot in said apartment ever. And if he comes to visit, he always stays at the threshold or just behind it. He doesn't ever enter it. And Marco is left to his own devices. One day he meets Isabel, or probably Isobel. I believe that she's Scottish because the name is very Scottish. I met quite a lot of Isobels when I lived in Scotland. And she is a true diviner. So she can actually lay the tarot and use the cards to divine the future. So she's an oracle. And then one day, Alexander decides to take the challenge to the next level. And the next level is, once you've got the contestants, you need the venue. So he seeks out one Chandresh Lefebvre, who's by the name you would say he's kind of Indian French, but he lives in London, and he's what I would call an impresario of the old school. So today we would probably call him a producer of events, an event manager, event producer. And Alexander gives him the idea that he should set up a circus. And he positions Marco, his champion, his contestant, as the private secretary of said Chandresh. And then he sends a letter to Hector saying, your move. And what Chandresh does is he starts talking to people who will set up a circus with him. And it's like a circus with different tents. So it's not just one tent and people walk in there and the acrobats and the artistes go in there and perform their tricks or their whatever it is that they do. But you have several tents that all do different things. You've got acrobats, you've got lion tamers, as it were. You've got all kinds of, you've got a contortionist and so on. You also have a tent where there will be a soothsayer, somebody who will lay the tarot, namely Isabel. Because what Marco and Alexander are doing is they are both enchanting, or he enchants Chandresh, so that Chandresh actually founds the circus. And in order to do this, he clouds his memory. And it only appears in the story later that he actually manipulates his brain, his mind. And he helps Chandresh audition new people to join the circus. And of course, one of them is Celia. And he makes him hire her because he knows that she is his opponent. So she's the illusionist in the circus. She doesn't really know that Marco is her opponent, but he realizes she is. And so basically, they set up the circus, they set up the sensations that will be shown, and they set up the circus as a night circus, or Cirque des Rêves, so Circus of Dreams. And it only opens in the evening and it closes in the morning, so from dusk till dawn. And it is in black and white. Everything is black and white. The tents are black and white. People are wearing black and white costumes and so on and so forth. And they start traveling and they are a sensation and it's wonderful. And all this time, and we're talking about several years passing. Incidentally, it's about 30 years that pass in the book and in the story. The circus becomes more and more intricate. More and more sensations are added. More and more tents are added. So there's a labyrinth tent. There's a tent of clouds where you can basically climb up something that looks like wisps of clouds, and then you can jump down and you fall down gracefully, like if you have a ring of feather falling, for example. That's what we're looking at. There is an ice garden. And all of this is, of course, achieved by actual magic. So Marco starts manipulating the circus to present his kind of magic. And Celia is also presenting her kind of magic when she works as an illusionist, but she also starts manipulating the circus. So she adds tents. And she begins to change the tents Marco has set up, and Marco is starting to change the tents she has made up. And so over time, the circus becomes more and more magical. The people within the circus do not age, or age really, really slowly. So slowly that they don't even realize that they're aging. People don't fall sick anymore. They're very, very healthy, but also no people are born. So it seems like if you work there, you don't age, you don't become sick, but you're also barren. And Isabel is, like I said, this divination person who's been put into the circus by Marco to keep an eye on Celia. The problem is that Isabel believes that Marco loves her, but Marco doesn't. And one day, Marco and Celia meet for the first time. And there is kind of an attraction on Marco's part, although Celia is kind of like, I don't know you, who are you? And she doesn't know who he is. She finds out later that he is her competitor. And after a while, it becomes quite clear that they are not only bound in the competition, but that they're star-crossed lovers. So there's something deeper going on here. And they realize after a while, and we're talking decades here, that there is no end to this competition. It's not like there's going to be a showdown, when the two contestants meet in an arena and each one of them starts flinging spells at the other, and then we'll see who will win. But it's really a contest to the death. So only one can survive, and the contest only ends when one of them is dead. And they realize that they can't do this because they love each other. They are deeply in love with each other, but they also love each other. So these are two different things. And unfortunately or fortunately, because we're dealing with fate here maybe as well, Isabel realizes, because Marco tells her so, that she's not his love interest. And she is annoyed by this. And she has been trying to keep the balance, because she's also magical to a certain degree, between the two. But she's so annoyed by the fact that he says, well, I don't really love you, that she takes away the charm that she has wrought from the circus. And things start to shift. The balance is beginning to crumple. And things go awry. And then there's another plot which involves the two children that were born on the night the circus was founded and first opened. So they are the only two that are born from acrobats at the circus while the circus exists. Widget and Poppet. And they are both magical as well. And Poppet meets Bailey, who's a nondescript farmer boy who basically wants to go to Harvard, or doesn't, maybe we're not quite sure, but his grandmother wants him to go to Harvard. His dad wants him to take over the farm, but he doesn't want neither. He doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life, which I think all of us can relate to, because at some point or another, each of us was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. And so essentially, Poppet... He meets Poppet one day when he sneaks into the circus during the day. She tells him how to find his way out, and she gives him a glove of hers. It's a dare, really. And when he's a child, he's about maybe 8 or so. And then later, when the circus comes back to his neck of the woods, which is somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the United States, he's grown up now, almost, and she's also grown up. She tells him that she shows him the circus, he meets her brother, they have a lovely time. He really experiences the magic of it all. And she tells him, something's happening to the circus, something's going wrong, something's badly going wrong. And she says, I believe that you can help us, but you need to come with us. And he's like, well, I can't just leave, And he then decides to go with them, but he's too late. When he arrives at the circus, they're already gone. So he travels to New York, to Boston, then to New York, to catch up with the circus, which is pretty much towards the end of the book, 1902, 31st October to 1st of November, when all of this happens, and then he finally does join the circus. But by this time, several things have happened. Celia and Marco have realized the futility of what's going on, that they cannot, either of them can't win and still be with the other afterwards, because winning means killing the other. And they both decide that they can't. Plus, plot twist, one of the acrobats, the Japanese contortionist Tsukiko, is actually the contestant from the most recent challenge who survived. And she's asked what happened to the other one. And she said, well, she's a stelae of ash, a column of ash somewhere in Kyoto, unless time and the elements have worn her away. And she also tells them that she was deeply in love and loved her contestant, and her contestant loved her as well, but the only way that they could stop it was by killing the other, or trying to kill the other, and they couldn't. So her contestant, her opponent I should say, set herself on fire and killed herself. And when asked when that was, she said it was over 80 years ago. She gives a precise date, I want to say 83 years, several months and so many days. But Tsukiko looks like she's maybe 20 or 25, she looks very young. So she also doesn't age. And then Celia is ready to kill herself, to end it all so that Marco can go free, because they cannot leave the circus. The circus has become part of them. They are part of the circus. The circus is way more than just a venue that you go to, where you work, where you make your money, where you show your tricks. The circus is them, and they are the circus. And if they decide to leave, the circus will, be destroyed. And nobody really knows what the repercussions are for the people who are part of the circus, because so far they haven't aged, so far they have kept really healthy. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Will they just age all of those 30 years or so in one day? Nobody knows, and they can't find out. And both Hector and Alexander, Hector in the meantime has turned himself invisible because he did some magical trick where he wanted to probably escape death. And now he's kind of insubstantial, and he's kind of like a ghost, although he's not dead. Won't tell them, and Alexander simply says, I don't know. It's about the repercussions of magic. I can't tell you what's going to happen. So they devise a way. Well, I would say probably it's Celia who devises a way that's pretty much modeled on what her father did in order to not die. And it's a similar thing. So she does something to the two of them, which means that they both go on. I don't want to say survive, but they go on. And going on means that somebody will have to take care of the circus to keep it going. And that's going to be Bailey. It's going to be Poppet and Widget. They're going to take care of it from within the circus. Outside of the circus, Chandrish is out of the game. He will be released from his duties because the circus has taken too much out of him, And he will go on to be an impresario and event manager for very many years to come. But he will not have anything to do with the circus anymore. And it's handed over to two other people who are part of the circus, let's say the outside world of the circus. Because there are also three distinct groups. There are the people inside the circus, or people who have become part of the circus because they power it, like Marco, who's not technically inside the circus, but the circus is a part of him. Then you have the people who are basically the impresario and the production team. That's the people around Chandresh. And then you have a third group, and that's the rêveurs, the dreamers, avid fans. So it's like the otaku of this circus. They travel, they follow the circus around, they write about it, they have get-togethers, they exist around the globe, and they they meet each other on a regular or irregular basis, and they can distinguish each other from normal patrons because they wear black and white with some spot of red, and they basically are the super fans of the circus. And even they are somehow so closely connected to the circus that it's not even clear what would happen to them. It could be that if the circus were to end, something terrible would happen to them as well. So both Celia and Marco say, we can't do that. We cannot do that. And if one of us wins, which means the other one dies, it could mean that all of these people will be so badly affected and nobody knows what's going to happen. So they basically hand over the handling of the internal part of the circus to Bailey, Poppet and Widget. The external part is handled by Liani Burgess and Mr. I forget his name. Anyway, Baris. And they will go on within the circus. But they will no longer make the circus. So in a way, they will be gone, but not quite. And that's when the story ends. And at the very end of the story, we are almost in today's time because somebody gets a visiting card for the circus, and it has an email address of Bailey. And of course, emails have only been around since, well, official emails that anybody could get have only been around since maybe the beginning of the 90s. So the last date that we know of is 1902, and then we're talking about 1992 at the earliest, so it's a 90-year span. So Bailey is still around, as are probably Widget and Poppet. So that's the story. Now, about this book. It is Erin Morgenstern's first book. She's only written one more, and that's The Starless Sea, which I haven't read yet, but which I'm going to get probably this week. And I have to say that it is one of my all-time favorites. It's a desert island book for me. First of all, I think jumping between those different groups of people and individual perspectives on the one hand, but also between the different times, could go terribly wrong if you have a bad author. But she's an excellent author, and she pulls it off. Each character has a unique voice, so whenever there's a perspective change, you know exactly who the perspective is. She uses present tense, which is highly unusual, but which gives it an immediacy, which really means you are in the story. And she sometimes there are certain interludes where she addresses the reader, and it's always you. Now, these two things are things that hit home for me, because at the moment I'm writing a very long story, which is a little bit like this book. It's episodic. And I also use second person, and I also use present tense. So it was quite interesting to see somebody else use it. I'm not comparing myself as a writer to Erin Morgenstern, because I don't have her quality at all. But it's interesting to see somebody else do it, because usually you have third person and past tense. The story is about the circus and about the people in it. But the circus itself is a character. She describes, she tells, I would say she shows the circus, its attractions, the tents, what's inside them. And what I find so interesting is that she uses, her style is sobriety. It's not lushness. It's not long sentences, smooth, honey-dripping storytelling. It's short sentences, to the point, very harsh light. But it's the sobriety of the language that is the excellent counterpoint to the fantastical element of the circus. Nothing hits home more acutely and strongly than having somebody dissect a magical illusion in very economical words, because this is showing, not telling. She isn't using wonderful long words, complicated sentence structures to tell you what the circus is like. She uses sober prose to let the reader and their imagination experience the night circus that has been woven by Celia and Marco. And I have to say I was blown away by it, because sometimes I say it doesn't really matter if you read the original version or if you read a translation. I have never read the German translation, so I don't know if it's any good. But here, I think the sobriety of the text is what makes this book unique. Because it's fantasy, it's fantasy, it's adult fantasy. And you could easily basically overburden this whole story using high fantasy Tolkien-esque language. There's none of it there. This reads like a guidebook through the lives of the people and through the actual circus. The storyteller, Erin Morgenstern, keeps no commentary. There is no way of knowing how Erin would feel about this. It is only you, the reader, through her sparse economical language, experiencing the lives of the people and the circus. And that is something that I think makes this book unique and means that it's not just one of so many other fantasy stories, fantasy novels that are out there. I recommend this to anyone who doesn't mind a slow-moving story, because fast-paced this is not. You only really get an explanation of the backstory. I would say as of 420, it's got 490 pages. So the first 420 pages, lots of things happen, but they are kind of like happening now, and you're experiencing them as they are being experienced in real time by the protagonists. Backstory and explanation only happens towards the very end. Some people might say, oh, that's when the plot happens. And I would say yes, if you are a traditionalist growing up in the 90s and you're only familiar with modern literature, then yes, this is probably true. For 400 pages, there is no plot. It does remind me of, I don't know how to phrase it, because I really hate the Brontes and Jane Austen. And when Jane Austen starts a novel and you take like the first 500 pages and you think, okay, when do we finally get to something? That's not what this is. But it is a very slow-moving story where you really have to be ready to receive the night circus into yourself. And if this is your thing, and if you are willing to spend your time on this, and it is a good read, it reads quickly if you wanted to. I said, okay, I'm going to do 50 pages a day, but then I couldn't put it down, so I ended up doing 100 pages a day. And it was like over in no time. Then this book is for you. Unfortunately, I cannot say or give you any title of any other books that are like it, because like I said, to me, this is quite unique. But it's a recommendation. If I were to rate it on Goodreads, I would give it 5 out of 5 stars, and I would say actually it deserves a 6th because it is so unique. But of course, please ignore this really ugly edition because it's terrible. So this is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, 2011. And yeah, get it, read it, enjoy it, become a rêveur. Talk to you soon. Bye.